This is Larry DeSempler from the Crossroads League, and if you want to maximize your potential for success, then I recommend subscribing to the Success is a Choice podcast.
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler. And today we have the distinct pleasure of having the Indiana High School Athletic Association Commissioner, Bobby Cox, on the line with us. After a long career as an athletic administrator, he joined the IHSAA in 2000 as an assistant commissioner. In 2011, he was selected to become only the 8th commissioner in state history. He now oversees an organization with 21 state tournament-sponsored sports in more than 400 schools. Bobby, we appreciate you joining us today on the show.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, now you've done so much throughout your career, and the IHSAA has done so much for so many student athletes and coaches throughout the years. But looking back in your career with the IHSAA, what are some things that stand out to you or that you're most proud of?
Well, when I started as an assistant in 2000, one of the very first things we did was the National Federation passed within their wrestling rules code the rule that every state had to have a weight management program for wrestlers. And that was a very new concept 17 plus years ago. And so we were the 5th state in the nation to start a weight management program in wrestling, and I was the one that authored it. And I had a lot of materials that former Commissioner Bechler provided to me, and I counseled with a lot of my colleagues around the country. But as I started off, and that was in the first year of my tenure here, I was very proud that we got that off the ground and running, and it's been going on now as per rule for 17 plus years, and I think it really safeguards the student athlete and in the sport of wrestling, and I feel really good about where we're at with that program. And there have been a lot of other things, but as I became commissioner, we made some fairly significant changes. We had a class in football, which I think was really needed at that point, to take the 32 largest schools in the state that play football and place them in a separate classification. We also authored Rule 2.5 of our bylaws, which is commonly known as the success factor, which allows for schools that have a great deal of success in lower classifications than the largest enrollment class to move up in that particular sport for a 2-year period. Most recently, we've started our unified sports program with Unified Track and Field, and it is the largest and fastest growing unified program in the country. Since 2013-14, we've grown from 13 schools to over 100 schools that participate in our unified track and field program and our partnership with Special Olympics. And then finally, we've started the IHSA Foundation. I'm very proud that we've been able to start the foundation, which will be a philanthropic arm of the IHSA, which will provide grant monies and scholarships and educational programming for coaches and student athletes. And as we continue to grow our foundation, we're looking forward to expanding our services. And I feel real good about where we're at with that initiative right now. We're still in our infancy, but we always are trying to change things here and trying to move things forward, and that's the pretty much the newest innovation that we've had.
Many of those highlights that you mentioned deal with student athletes, and one of the ways to have great student athlete experiences is to have great coaches. You've seen a lot of great coaches. What are some of the common traits or qualities that the best coaches you've seen, they all possess?
Well, I think first and foremost, Jamie, the best coaches that I've been able to witness truly have the student athlete in the forefront of their mind. They are student athlete driven. They're transformational coaches. I spoke about the foundation a moment ago, and the IHSA Foundation is working with our member schools with the Inside Out Coaching Initiative. And as I look at, and we've got 3 coaches, and since I've been in the office, 3 of our high school coaches have been inducted into the National High School Hall of Fame: Dick Dullahan, Chuck Keppen, and Steve Shondell. And when I look at those 3 gentlemen, I know that in their mind, the student athlete is first and foremost. Yeah, winning's important, and they are all very, very successful state championship coaches multiple times. But they're that way because the student athlete comes first. And I think when that happens, really good things occur in member schools.
Well, and Indiana has been known for lots of athletic success, certainly basketball with Hoosier Hysteria, but a lot of other sports have been very successful. But with that also comes a responsibility to have sportsmanship. And I know that that's been a major emphasis for you guys in the IHSAA, but what kind of programs or initiatives have you guys developed to help student athletes or schools or communities understand a little bit more the importance of sportsmanship and that it's not all about winning?
Well, we've done several things, Jamie. We have an ongoing sportsmanship program that we roll out with our marketing partners at the 360 Group, and it's sponsored by Ivy Tech here in Indiana. And each year, our member schools receive a sportsmanship kit that has posters, a DVD, and a print media disc that they can use for their programs. We provide video and audio clips that they can use in their venues. And that's an ongoing program. We have a sportsmanship score card that goes on every member's website page. IHSA.net is our members-only password-protected website. And when every member logs in of a morning, the first thing they see is their sportsmanship score. And we monitor that daily. And we make it a point that that is first and foremost as we work with our student athletes. And then we continue to do other things. We've partnered with the NAIA and their Champions of Character program over the past several years. Member schools can earn a banner by completing 5 different criteria within that program. And it's a very high bar. 17 schools achieved that last year, and so we've been distributing banners for presentation. Actually, last Friday afternoon, Assistant Commissioner Sandra Walter and I attended a convocation at New Haven High School outside Fort Wayne, and where they presented their banner to their school student body. So those are things that we're working on, and we continue to provide reminders to coaches, reminders to student athletes, a high presence on social media with our Face of Sportsmanship program. So there's a lot going on around sportsmanship, and it's something that will continue to occur and something that needs to continue and improve, because that is the one keystone element, I think, that will separate high school sports from all other sports in our society.
Well, and you mentioned other sports in the society. You know, college sports, you turn on ESPN or Fox Sports or whatever you watch, and you see college sports coming under a lot of scrutiny or criticism for being too big a business or losing touch with the mission of their institutions. How do you at the IHSAA work to make sure that high school athletics remains a healthy part and that there's a balance there with the educational process?
Well, it goes all the way back to our purpose. And if you look at in the bylaws of the IHSA, there's a purpose. And in that purpose, it says that athletics must remain subservient to the academic missions of the schools. And so the rules that the association has for its membership are all pointed toward that concept, that athletics is subservient to the academic mission of schools. We have a scholarship rule. And the first and foremost, we want kids to graduate from high school so that they're prepared to move on to the next level, whatever that next level might be. For many kids, it's a 4-year institution. For some kids, it's a 2-year institution. For some kids, it's the job market. For some kids, it's the military to protect the freedoms that we enjoy so that we can have education-based athletics in our state and for every state. So whatever that is, that has to be the priority. So our rules support that. And we talk a lot about that with our member school principals and athletic administrators in our fall principal meeting tour and our spring principal meeting tour, as well as their individual conferences, that athletics should be supportive of the education process and not the other way around where athletics takes the lead. And sometimes that can be a blurred line because everybody wants to win and everybody wants to have success, and it's fun to win. But you have to do it the right way, and you need to make sure that we're tending to our business first, and athletics is the reward by which you receive from doing the things you should be doing in the classroom.
And you put a lot of emphasis on principal-centered. Principals are the ones that vote, and principals are the ones that sign off on things. Has that worked out well for you guys?
Well, this organization started in 1903 because of principals. It's kind of an interesting little short story is that the principals were having a conference in Richmond, Indiana, and the keynote speaker couldn't get there. And so these principals had some dead time on their hand, and they got together and they said, we really need to have some rules for sports. We've got some situations going on out here in our schools that are untenable. We've got 22, 23-year-old individuals playing on high school teams. They're not going to school, and we're going to get somebody hurt or maybe even killed if we continue to do this. And you might remember that was about the same time that Teddy Roosevelt was talking to the NCAA about banning football. And so with all of that going on, the principals wrote what was called the Richmond Agreement. And the Richmond Agreement was the infrastructure for the IHSAA. And they hired a permanent secretary, a gentleman by the name of Arthur Truster, and that was how the organization was formed. The principal has the vote. There's not 409 member schools, and every one of them has a principal, and they are the ones that can propose changes to our bylaws. They are the ones that have the vote with respect to who represents them on the board of directors. They can make suggestions to our staff at any time. And they work in tandem with the athletic director in their school to ensure that we maintain our purpose and provide the best programming possible. So the principal is paramount.
Turning our attention to something else that's in the sports world right now is parenting with LeVar Ball. And I'm sure that you get one or two comments every once in a while about parenting at the high school level. And if you were giving advice to parents, so there's parents listening to this, how can they best help their sons or daughters reach their potential as student athletes?
The best thing that parents can do is be supportive and let the school coaches and athletic administration run those programs. I've always said this, Jamie, when everybody stays in their lane, we have a really good product. Coaches need to coach. Student athletes need to play. Officials need to officiate. Parents need to cheer hard for their team. And if everybody does that, we have a wonderful product. But what happens is we get people outside their lane. We get coaches trying to tell officials how to officiate. And we get officials telling our coaches how to coach. And parents yelling at officials. And kids are the ones at the end of this equation, and they're the ones that are the ones that suffer. They just want to go out and play. And if you look at studies about high school sports, any level of sports, below the professional level, and maybe even the collegiate level, the number one reason young people play sports is to have fun. And when adults get outside their lane, kids aren't having fun, and kids quit. And that's not what this is supposed to be about. So my best advice for parents is be supportive, let the coaches do their job, let the kids have fun, and enjoy the experience, because it's a short experience. That 9 through 12 experience is a very short time. Those 4 years go by in a blink, and then it's over. And, I talk to parents a lot when their kids have graduated from high school. They've gone on, and the vast majority of them don't even play when they leave high school. And the one thing those parents tell me is they missed the games. It became part of their social life. It became part of their being. And when their kid leaves, it's over, and they don't go anymore. And I tell them that, enjoy it while it's there. Don't make it something that's a negative experience. And that would be my best advice to parents.
That way, you don't have to put out too many fires and have too many things brought to your table. But I'm sure that you sometimes feel like you're a fireman, always having to put out fires and different things like that. And you've seen your fair share of controversy and challenges. What have been some of the rough patches and things maybe turned out better than maybe you thought? Tell us a little bit how you've worked through some of the rough patches you've had as an IHSAA commissioner.
Well, there's been a couple of incidences where we've had to take schools out of IHSAA Tournament Series events. We had a boys basketball incident several years ago, and we had a girls basketball incident the year after that. And as I mentioned earlier, the IHSAA is about trying to create opportunities for participation and for young people to have a chance to play high school sports. So taking an opportunity away from a group of individuals is never fun. And the IHSAA takes no pleasure or joy in doing that. But sometimes you have to take a stand, and sometimes it's necessary. And when you have behaviors that are unacceptable and even verge on being dangerous, and they become egregious, then there has to be some strong discipline exerted. We call that tough love. It's just like a parent who issues tough love to a kid. There are situations that are unacceptable, and when teams break out in a fight in a game, it's unacceptable, and there has to be some correction. Now, those are tough patches. You don't enjoy doing that. You don't enjoy discussing those things. But I would tell you that the end result and what we're striving for is a better posture of sportsmanship across our state, that our schools understand that will not be tolerated, and there will be a severe penalty, and they need to have that conversation with their student athletes and learn how to deal with adversity. You know, things just don't go your way all the time in sports. You got to learn to deal with defeat. You got to learn to deal with adversity. You got to learn to deal with a bad call. It happens. You got to learn to deal with a bad bounce. And I'm watching the girls' golf tournament, and this young lady's playing this fall in our state championship golf tournament and hits what looks to be just a perfect golf shot, and it clips the last tree in her way of approaching the green. It drops in the creek. She takes a penalty. She hits the next ball in the creek. She's visibly upset about that. And you got to just learn how to deal with that. And you got to learn how to move on from those things. And that's what athletics teaches us. So while those things are tough to deal with and you don't want to mess with them, you have to do it. You have to take a stand. I'm not afraid to take a stand. I think it's the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, if you can look at yourself and you said you did the right thing for all student athletes, all 160,000 of them, and all 409 member schools to preserve this enterprise we call education-based athletics, then we've done the right thing. Not fun, don't want to do it again, but it might happen, and if it happens, we'll deal with it.
We'll get back to the Bobby Cox interview in just a moment, but I wanted to mention something that goes hand in hand with what Bobby and the IHSAA is trying to do. They want to build up student athletes and help them maximize their success both as athletes and as citizens. Well, we have written a book that goes along with this. The Leadership Playbook, Become Your Team's Most Valuable Leader, is now available. It teaches student athletes how to be better leaders and positive teammates. You see, when we help develop today's students, we can influence the future. Frederick Douglass once said that it is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. Visit theleadershipplaybook.com to learn more about this impactful book. And now back to more insights from Bobby Cox. What are some of the biggest challenges that you think high school sports is facing today and then maybe going on into the future?
Well, I think the sportsmanship piece is something that is always at the forefront of everybody's mind. You know, there's 51 of us that do this job around the country at state association offices. And we meet together in the summertime. We meet in the winter. We have a legal meeting in the spring. And inevitably, every time we talk about what's the biggest challenge, it's sportsmanship. And then you can get into finance and you can get into branding and marketing and what is our purpose and all of those different things. But at the end of the day, if we don't protect these sports and we don't make them enjoyable, people will quit playing them and people will quit coaching them and people will quit watching them. And so I think that's the biggest challenge. And then moving forward, I think the thing that we are trying to do here at our association is to make sure that we make high school sports, what we call education-based athletics in the state of Indiana, different than every other stanchion of sports in this state. It's different than youth sports. It's different than collegiate sports. It's different than professional sports. That little window of 9 through 12, protecting that and forwarding that, making it so that it is an integral part of the education experience in a high school, that it is complementary yet subservient to the academic missions of our schools. That's the challenge. And there, you know, we're dealing with a new millennium. And so when we're dealing with a different mindset of folks, we have to adapt the way we communicate. When I started here over 17 years ago, social media was not a big deal. Matter of fact, it wasn't really even in existence. today it's probably one of the biggest ways we communicate. And I think moving forward, we got to be willing to change. We got to be willing to adapt. We got to be willing to teach all and reach all of these groups: student athletes, parents, administrators, coaches, our fan bases, our communities. I think we've got to put that into a capsule, and that is the challenge of making sure we're communicating our message and prolonging our message of good sportsmanship, wholesome activity, and complementary academics.
As you look to move forward and establish yourself or continue to maintain how excellent you are and how different you are than all the other levels of sport, what are some things maybe in the next 5 years regarding IHSAA sports would you like to see? What would you like to see happen? Are there some sports you'd like to see added or programs developed or maybe some new guidelines adopted?
Well, there are a lot of things that we're looking at. With respect to new sports, right now our bylaws provide that when 50% of the membership is playing a sport at the same time, the commissioner can recommend a championship series in that sport. We don't have any sports out there right now that are meeting that standard, with the exception of bowling. And the one thing I like about the possibility of adding bowling is it reaches a totally different kid in that member school. Most kids that bowl aren't on the football team or the basketball team or any other team. They bowl. And so now we've got an opportunity to reach a new group of kids with this whole notion of education-based athletics, and they can become part of the school community. They can become part of that varsity program and participate. But there's some challenges that go along with that. We would have to have some new guidelines. There are other great sports out there that are being administered by other organizations. There's lacrosse, and there's rugby, and there's hockey, and there's just a whole list of different things that are going on out there. The one thing that we have to figure out as a membership is, if we're going to change that guideline or change that standard and lower that number from half the membership to something lower, can our member schools afford those programs? It's not very easy in a member school right now to make that dollar stretch to cover 18, 20, 21 different sports if you've got a full complement of sports. And we hate to see schools do this, but they have to survive. Many of our schools have turned to a pay-to-participate model, where there's a big fee right at the beginning of the year that the parent has to pay for that student to participate. And I hate to see that happen. So we got to figure out creative ways to meet that challenge within the next 5 years and moving forward. I am always for any kind of activity we can add that brings more kids into the fold of what we're doing with the IHSAA. But it's got to be something that our member schools can afford and administer properly.
As someone that's leading the huge organization with over 400 schools and as many student athletes as you have, and as much as you do, how do you recharge? How do you grow as a leader? How do you continue to grow and develop yourself personally? Are there conferences you attend or podcasts you listen to or books you read? What do you do to grow and develop continually?
Well, I really enjoy the opportunities that we have with the National Federation. We have a summer meeting, and that's a meeting that our entire staff and our board of directors attend, and that's a big meeting. Then we have a winter meeting, and the winter meeting is the 51 executive directors or commissioners around the country, and that I really enjoy that meeting because it's the other 50 of us that sit in that seat and have the same issues. They're just wrapped a little bit differently in each state. And, you know, there's participation rule issues, there's transfer issues, there's sportsmanship issues in every state. And so I really enjoy listening to that. When I get away from the Federation meetings and, you know, if I'm on my own, I'm a real fan of Simon Sinek and the start with why concept. And, you know, if you're going to make a change, why are you doing it? You know, everybody wants change, but you got to have a reason why you're doing it. Start with the why and then work out to the what and the how. And I really enjoy that concept. So I read a little bit of that. I listen to a little bit of that. And then I try to read a little bit when I'm a little downtime. If I'm traveling, particularly if I'm flying somewhere to a meeting, I try to read a little bit about leadership and And I've really enjoyed Joe Ehrman's book, Inside Out Coaching, and that's the initiative that we're going to start here with our foundation. We've already had our first kickoff meeting. I really enjoy that. The notion that we're going to be a transformational coach rather than a transactional coach. We're not so worried about wins and losses, state championships, all-state athletes, blah, blah, blah. We're more worried about the student-athlete and developing them into productive young citizens. And so those are the kinds of things I enjoy reading and listening to.
You've mentioned the National Federation of High Schools a couple times now. They're also located in Indianapolis where you are, as well as the NCAA. Are you able to partner with them or do any cooperative stuff with them? Is it beneficial for you guys all to be in the same area?
Well, it's beneficial to the IHSAA because since the NFHS is headquartered in Indianapolis, their meetings, other than the summer and the winter meeting when we move it around the country, the legal meetings are always in Indianapolis. The rules meetings are always in Indianapolis. And so when our staff members or I attend those meetings, it's very convenient. You know, the NFHS used to be in Kansas City before it moved to Indianapolis in 2000. And so that travel becomes burdensome when you're sending people out to rules meetings all the time and committee meetings and so on and so forth. So it's a very convenient opportunity for the IHSAA to have it right here in town. And we do partner with them just like every state association. Right now the NFHS is running a My Reason Why campaign. And the My Reason Why is a very simple question. We ask young people, why do you play? What's your reason for playing high school sports? And we're capturing that in video and audio, and we're sharing that information around the country. So the NFHS becomes the repository for those testimonials. And those are things that are very important to us, and it is convenient that they are here.
Where can people connect with you or learn more about you or the IHSAA?
Well, we have a good presence on Twitter, and our Twitter account, we have over 100,000 followers, and we'd ask anybody to start following us at IHSAA1, the numeral 1, IHSAA1. We have the largest Twitter following of any state association in the United States. We've made it a priority because we want to try to reach out to this generation of young people, and that's where they're located. That's where they're catching their information at 140 characters at a pop. But you can always visit our website at IHSAA.org or our foundation website at IHSAFoundation.org. And we continue to develop those websites and provide information. IHSATV.org is our internet streaming site. And, for example, we stream every one of our team sport draw shows on the internet. So when we have a pairing show for football, we just had it a couple weeks ago. We have a pairing show for basketball coming up in the winter for girls and boys. That's going to be on IHSA TV. And we encourage our patrons to go there and watch those shows. And you'll learn a lot about the IHSA from those various sources.
Well, excellent. We appreciate your time, Bobby. Thank you for joining us, sharing a little bit about the IHSAA and your thoughts on high school sports and how parents and coaches and everyone can partner together to make it the best experience for student athletes. So thanks for joining us.
Jamie, thank you for having me, and I appreciate everything you're doing to lead people.
This episode with Bobby Cox was very informative today. Whether you are a parent, coach, administrator, athlete, or a fan, you should be able to take away something of value from our conversation. I've worked with Bobby in the past and seen him up close, and I can tell you he definitely cares about student athletes and desires to teach them lifelong lessons through the platform of sports. If you enjoyed this episode today, please help others find out about it by leaving a quick 5-star review on iTunes. And until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?